Come, spell weavers, reavers, rogues, and men-at-arms, and answer the call of adventure. Pick up your sword, your axe, your spellbook, your bow, your rulebook, and your dice, and join the forces of good in their eternal fight against vile monsters, conspiring min-maxers, horny bards, and blood-soaked murder hobos. Discover the treasure trove of role-playing games here on Rollin Bones. My name is Ryan Howard, and I shall be your guide. Good evening, Boneheads, and welcome back to Rollin Bones with Ryan Howard, where we are making old school young again. I am your host and king of the Boneheads, Ryan Howard. I am the RNOSR. And do you guys like my intro? I hope you do. I hope you really like that intro, because tonight we have the man who created that intro for me. He is a composing genius. He's been on the show before. He and his brother Joe Page created Project Fullblade, and he is here tonight to talk about his new heavy metal audio comic, Ruthless, and so much more. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Rollin Bones, Mr. John Page.
Yeah, cheers to that. I've got some makers here in my Glencairn glass. So
sweet.
Just I don't know if you know this, but the first person to ever use my music for their show or stream was Pete, and that's how you found me.
Yeah.
But the first person I ever composed a custom intro for was you. So you
Nice.
You deflowered me, you toxic brute. How dare you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I do it again.
Terrible. Terrible. I'm going to add Eliza Blue and tag you so she comes after you.
Oh, God. But no, it's always interesting to me to see, like, the company that I'm in with people who have John Page intros, because it's me, it's Pete, Mark Claire. Does Clint still use your music for his intro?
Yeah, still uses it, and I may or may not be doing a original for him to update it, so we'll see. Time will tell. Maybe, maybe not.
But yeah, it's all those heavy hitters and then me. And they're like up here and I'm down here. So, you know, it's nice to be in such esteemed company.
There we go. Well, I'm working to grow that list. We'll see how effectively I can do that. I'm pivoting more toward working with, and we were talking about this before stream, Iron Age creators and creating some music for some of these stories they're doing, which is really what got me back into writing music. I wanted to get into fantasy and sci-fi scoring, and doing that, I kind of got back into heavy metal because I love, I'm a lead guitarist by trade, so I'm kind of doing a little bit of everything. It's fun.
Absolutely. And we're going to dig into the Iron Age here at the beginning of the show. But before we do that, we, of course, need to give a very special shout out to someone who has had a very big life event happen recently. And that is, of course, your brother, Joe Page. He is a father. His firstborn was born just a few days ago. So, Joe, congratulations. And I hope to see you back on the show someday to talk more about Project Fullblade.
I'm sure he thanks you. Thank you very much. I do have a new niece. Her name is Nova, and she's great. I've already got her some good onesies. I got her a Dio onesie and a Tony Soprano onesie where he's holding a big thing of gabagool, and it just says gabagool. So she's starting off right.
Absolutely, absolutely. As an Italian myself, I give you 5 of these hand gestures out of 5.
Oh, there we go.
Those of you who are listening on audio, you know the hand gesture I made. Come on. Well, to kick things off tonight, because we're going to be talking so much about the Iron Age, I think that's a good place to begin. For anyone out there who doesn't know that term or where it came from, I'll let you start, and we'll kind of give everyone a primer on what the Iron Age is.
Sure. You want me to kind of give my perspective on how it all started?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So I obviously I'm going to get to Razor Fist because I think that's where it was really codified. But from my perspective, and I was rolling in these kind of freedom, liberty related circles for years now. We already kind of touched on that, and started to make contacts with a lot of creatives. Eric July comes out with ISOM #1, and it really just blew up. And as it was blowing up, I've heard of Comicsgate before, but I was introduced to a lot of Comicsgate artists. I think I threw a tweet out like, "Hey, I never really talked to a bunch of Comicsgate people, but now that I'm in all these different chats with them, they're really talented and cool people." And that tweet blew up. It was a very simple tweet that kind of blew up, and I had a lot of artists follow me, and I followed them back. From that kind of whole experience, I found the artist for Ruthless, which we'll get to down in the episode. But yeah, Eric July comes out with ISOM #1, generates a lot of excitement. And it wasn't just the money or the total sales. There was excitement online for it. People really wanted to just see what he was doing. And he really showed that, he had an advantage because he's been building a name over a long period of time with his band and his YouTube show. So he did have like a built-in fan base. So he did it the smart way. Put his own money out to collect all the rewards. So I really respect what he did there. But the excitement was undeniable. And as this was going on, Shadversity was doing his own graphic novel. Razor Fist was releasing a graphic novel, and all these creatives are really just getting inspired from all this going on. And then Razor Fist released the infamous video where he says, "Welcome to the Iron Age." Right? This is what the Iron Age is. And I connected with me as a metal guy and a creator, and now a storyteller, which I've never been previously before this. He just kind of codified that, and channels started popping up covering it. Like I told you, Royce from A Drink with Crazy has a channel dedicated to the Iron Age. Richard from IronAge.media, it's a website, it's an aggregator for all these independent stories being released. So you can simply go to his website, and pretty much most of the Iron Age stuff that's out there is on there now, including Razor Fist and Shadversity and Ripaverse and smaller creators like myself and 365 Infantry and some other creators that they're going to be on there soon. So I don't know if I want to blow up their spot yet, but to me, that was kind of, it was this whole process of, and I don't know if Eric July considers ISOM in the Iron Age, but without a doubt, he inspired the energy. And Razor Fist, in his genius, was smart enough to codify it with that term. And a lot of creators grabbed onto it. Hundreds of creators grabbed onto that term, and they're doing independent stories under that label.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And from my perspective, what we're dealing with here is mainstream, or I even hesitate to call it it's still mainstream. Never mind. I'll rescind that comment. But mainstream legacy media is in decline. It's big time in decline. All the big billion-dollar movies, all the big comic book companies, the big role-playing game companies, all of them are experiencing some of the worst failures they've ever experienced. It's not enough at this point just to put a D and an ampersand and a D on a role-playing book, especially after all the OGL stuff that's been happening and all the bad publicity that WotC's been getting. I think it's only going to get worse, by the way, but we'll come back to that. Same thing with DC and Marvel. People haven't been buying comic books for forever at this point, except for the Comicsgate stuff. So a lot of these big giants of media, these established names, the Coke and Pepsi of role-playing or comics, they're all experiencing failure, and it's even starting to seep into the movies. The Marvel movies are not doing what they once did. DC movies have never really taken off at all, and I don't see that changing in the next 5 to 10 years. There's a shift happening. There's a shift that's very reminiscent of the shift that happened when the new school of cinema came in the 1970s. There's a passing of the torch going on, whether they want to admit it or not. And I think the Iron Age is going to be the front line of taking over what is currently mainstream media and turning it into something new, something more authentic, something more real, and something more creative than what mainstream media is doing now. So I hope people like Eric July and people like Razor Fist and people like yourself are prepared to really like take the fight to kind of the big titans of media right now, because that's I feel like that's what this Iron Age movement is poised to do.
Yeah, and I've talked about this a few times. The Iron Age movement cannot compete financially. And
Right.
we need, as creators, we need to realize that. But that said, money isn't everything, and you do not necessarily need a lot of money to deliver quality. And let's go back, talk about some of these franchises you called out. Right, you missed Star Wars. Let's pull that in, because that is the biggest travesty as far as just losing all the respect of like hardcore Star Wars fans. Think about what they did to Luke Skywalker. Think about what they did to Obi-Wan Kenobi. I know that show sucked and it didn't get a lot of pub, but for me, like, I knew it was going to be the end, but I watched it. I'm like, I'm going to watch every episode of Obi-Wan on Disney Plus and accept the fate that they're dealing to me, but this is pretty much going to kill it. And they exceeded my negative expectations by 100-fold.
Yeah.
Could not believe what they put out. Just not even the woke stuff, just quality. Just the quality of the product they put out was an embarrassment. And that's just Star Wars, right? Star Wars is ruined. It's ruined. It's not coming back. Marvel, Eternals, I believe, lost money. Black Widow lost money. Shang-Chi broke even. Yeah. But, if you're dropping $200 million on a project, do you want to see a break even at the end of it? That's not really a success.
Exactly.
That's a different type of business than like a standard corporation who's breaking even, where they can pay people and continue on. We're talking movies that take 2 years to make, and all these different people are involved. So a break even is not a success. And they're heavy hitters, or at least what they have left. Thor, Doctor Strange performed and turned a bit of profit, but not what they were expecting for the money that they're actually putting out on these movies. DC, God, I don't even want to get DC. That's a whole other. I mean, I'm pissed that they got rid of Henry Cavill.
Yeah.
For Superman, a lot of people are, and James Gunn is, as far as like movie creators, he's not the worst. He's actually put movies out that I've enjoyed. So I kind of wanted to see him succeed, but I feel bad for the poor bastard who's got to fill Henry Cavill's shoes as Superman in whatever movie he's putting out. Because man, if he doesn't nail that casting, his whole universe is toast. Because he's already damaged the good faith with DC fans with the move that he pulled there. So Iron Age. Here's my prediction: in the next 5 years, we're going to have a lot of stories come out of the Iron Age. There's going to be a lot that have quality issues that need to be improved, and those creators deserve honest feedback so we can get them where they want to be.
Yeah.
But I think you're going to have some home runs come out of the Iron Age story-wise from small creators, not a Eric July or a Razor Fist or a creator that's already built a name for themselves. I think you're going to see a home run from some small creators, and hopefully it's me. It's probably not going to be, but I think you'll see some people make a name for themselves, and I guarantee you in the next 5 years, one of these properties is going to be picked up. Maybe it won't be a big budget, but it'll be picked up for a streaming for a streaming service. And I think that's really going to be our first big victory of, we're beating you at your own game now. Watch out. And they're only going to degrade from here, and we're only going to improve. So we just got to stick in for the long game. I'm telling 5 years time, one of them is going to happen. That's my prediction.
To go back to a point that you made about we're not, the Iron Age is not going to be able to compete financially. As an example, I want to show you guys something. Now, those of you who watch the show regularly, you know what this is. This is Hyperborea. It's put out by a company called Northwind Adventures. Northwind Adventures is one guy, Jeff Talanian, and he put out this giant, beautiful book filled with gorgeous art. It's black and white. It was done on Kickstarter. It was made on a budget. but this book is better than anything Wizards of the Coast has put out in the 9 years of 5th edition. Hyperborea is better than all of 5th edition. This one book right here. This is an example of what we can do. We may not have the budgets of your Wizards of the Coast or your DC or your Marvel or your Disneys, but what we have is creative energy. And that's the most important thing moving forward, because even the normiest of normies can detect that something is wrong. There's something wrong with the movies and the TV shows that they have previously relied upon for their entertainment. Something's just not clicking. But when it comes to what we have and what we can work with, we're working within restrictions, and out of restrictions comes inventiveness and creativity. So that's how you get something like a Hyperborea, or like a Ruthless, or like an Isom. You know, we're working with what we have. We're working with the tools at our disposal. And if the creativity and the drive and the energy is behind us, it's not even going to matter that the budget is smaller, because anyone in any industry or any hobby can name something with a small budget that absolutely blew something big budget out of the water.
Oh, yeah. From a profitability perspective, which at the end of the day, if you're making media for money, that's all that matters. It's not what you spend. It's not what you make. It's what that difference is of how much you spend compared to how much you make, right? What's your actual profit off your product? And you're 100% right. And again, going back to Star Wars and Marvel, how much money are they spending on these shows and their and movies, and they're not getting their return?
Yeah,
not really, not the return they're looking for. So that's proof that it doesn't matter how, you can't just throw money at a problem and expect it to be solved. You've got to engage it and give it your best and think and be creative. And the brilliance of old school Dungeons and Dragons was, I've said this recently too, Gary Gygax of just genius creativeness. It wasn't, look at the first edition books that came out. They weren't really big budget, right? There was some amazing art in the old school D&D books, but outside of that, it wasn't like this $100 million effort that Gary Gygax went through to get this game out. And it was a masterpiece, and that's what made the name. That's what caught role-playing games on. I mean, it was Dungeons and Dragons, and that was it for the longest time. So yeah, if somebody can really take, and I think the secret here is taking their time. If you're a creator, take your time and make a masterpiece. Don't rush it out. It's not necessarily all about speed. It's how you can connect with somebody and their imagination, and have them feed that to other people to connect with their imagination and have that grow from a word of mouth, organic, grow in an organic way. I guess what I'm trying to say. I think that's the secret, and we can do it. We don't need a lot of money to do that.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, all of this just kind of reminds me of, all the way back in the 80s, there were these two dudes living in New Hampshire named Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird, who had no name and no recognition. And together they put out a black and white comic book that you may have heard of called Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which became a giant media phenomenon. I mean, that's what we're looking at here. We're essentially waiting on the next Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles to come along.
Yeah, and imagine if somebody could, obviously not deliver a comic book about turtles who are ninjas. That would be ripping off. But that same creative gusto. Yeah. Like, what can you put out? Like, let's say, and maybe this isn't as creative, but I've been reading Ethan Van Sciver's Cyberfrog. Mm-hmm. Finally picked up my copy of Blood Honey. And, it's a cyberfrog, and, I'm sure a lot of stuff with amphibians and cyber stuff. Robots have been done before, hybrids. But just the way he did the art and the story, I'm not completely finished, about halfway through, but it's really cool to just read that late at night when everybody's sleeping and kind of transport myself into this world that he created. Mm-hmm. But yeah, they're out there. Those creators that are going to write that next massive property that comes out of nowhere, they're out there, and I definitely think we have a few in the Iron Age.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, something to kind of go off on a little bit of a tangent here, because we're talking about the decay of the legacy media and how we're in real time essentially watching the Roman Empire collapse in multiple ways. Recently, and by recently I mean either yesterday or today, I don't remember precisely when this happened, but Kyle Brink, the executive producer of D&D, said something stupid. He went on someone's show and essentially said people like me, and the clear implication is, white males, people like me can't get out of the hobby fast enough, which is a stupid thing to say when you're at a super high position in role-playing games, because the obvious joke there is, all right, leave then. Quit your high-paying job where you're directing the kind of the tides of role-playing, as it were, and just don't let the door hit you on the ass on the way out. But yeah, this is what we're dealing with now. We're dealing with mediocre creatives who essentially get off on lording what little remaining power they have over those of us who ensure that they get to feed their families. So, what are your thoughts on that situation and, that trend as a whole?
So when I first saw the Kyle Brink stuff, and I have never heard of this guy before today. I think I saw it this morning for the first time, and I was like, what? When I first saw it, the headlines were Kyle Brink says white man shouldn't play D&D, and that's a misrepresentation of what he said. And I hate when people do that.
Yeah,
what he said was bad enough. Just say what he said, and we can pick that apart plenty. He said, something like people like me or can't get out of the game fast enough. So he's an executive at a corporation.
He is.
So am I. If an executive at a corporation is basically telling you, oh, you guys should eventually fire me, because, and I'm sorry, let me set this up a little better. The article, he was talking about diversity. So this is in the context of diversity in the workplace. So it's not like we're misrepresenting what he said. Taking the leap of white men shouldn't play D&D compared to what he said, that's what he was saying, essentially, because it was in the context of diversity and the people that worked at Dungeons and Dragons. And I think it's a real travesty, because what happens is, like, actual diversity where of thought, and if you want to include nationality, that's fine. But honestly, it should be a meritocracy where the best person for the job wins. Doesn't matter if they love it. If somebody loves D&D and they played every single edition and they're a Gygax expert, you shouldn't be running D&D unless you're a Gygax expert. I don't care if you hate him. I don't care if he wasn't the perfect person. You got to be a Gygax expert if you want to really run D&D into the future and make it successful long term. Because that's your roots, that's your history, and if you forget that, you're doomed to repeat it. Yeah, my first thought was never trust an executive who's saying you should fire me because I'm a white male. Because everybody should have some sort of sense of, I need to preserve myself, which sounds selfish, but we all should be a little selfish, right? Like, You don't want to get fired from your job. You shouldn't lie and be unethical. You should do a good job at your, and do good work. And if you don't, then maybe you should get fired. But for the people that, really try and do a good job and show up and put in some effort, I would never want to be fired from my job. From the sole fact that I'm a white male. I mean, that's just ridiculous. My second thought was, I'll be 40 this year. I'll be 40 this year. I was trying to say next year and give me an extra year, make 1 year younger. But for you youngins out there, this kind of stuff evolves. It evolves over the decades. So yeah. Right now, it is what it is now, right? Like, I don't want to say I'm the target, but they're just they're hypothetical strawman white male that they put up there for their target. lost my train of thought there. That's going to evolve into somebody else soon. That's not a white male. So if you want to normalize this type of behavior, you should be really calling it out and to the point of boycotting these companies. I really think that's what it's going to take.
Yeah.
Hit them in the pocketbook, put them out of business. But, we're not going to be the target forever. And it's going to move on to somebody else. And when it moves on to you, it's like, oh, what's going on here now? And again, if you want to go back in the news and see how things evolved, Democrats evolved, Republicans evolved. Republicans today and Republicans 20 years ago, not the same creature. Same thing with Democrats.
Absolutely.
Same thing with libertarians. Everything evolves, and nothing is persistent for too long. That's why being true to your principles and virtues about, hey, this is right or this isn't right is important. But anyway, I'll stop going on a tangent. But yeah, just a complete distrust of what this guy said. You should distrust him, even if you're not a white male, even if you're the person that he's targeting. For him to come out and say, oh yeah, you can fire me. No, he's not going anywhere unless he is legitimately fired. He's going to retain his position and find a way to be there. And I don't trust any of these people where the first thing they look at for everything is race and not the character of the person they're dealing with, how much they love what they're doing. That stuff is so important. It's beauty is on the inside, as some people would say.
Yeah. It's interesting what you said, that, the sense of self-preservation. It reminds me very much of Rand. A lot of people misunderstand Ayn Rand when she says that selfishness is a virtue. What that means is if you don't care at all about yourself, you are going to get run over. You're going to get flattened by institutions, people that don't care whether you live or die. So you need to look out for yourself because no one else is looking out for you. That's what Rand means when she says, essentially, that selfishness is a virtue. And that's one of those things that people who critique her like to, throw out there as, oh, these people are crazy. They think selfishness is good. Rand just said it in the most provocative way that she possibly could because that's what Ayn Rand did. Now, to move away from Ayn Rand, because that could be a whole episode in itself, what this guy is doing, I don't believe for a second that this Kyle Rink person is any kind of ideologue or someone that actually, knows the theories that he's spouting. This is a man who is a weasel. He's what Gad Sad calls a sneaky fucker. He's one of these people who's putting on the coat of, this is the ideology that people are saying because this is what I think I need to say so that these people don't show up, in my yard with pitchforks and torches and try to, tar and feather me and throw me out of town on a rail. These are, this is a man trying to pander to current thing. And at this point, I have no patience for that, and I hope all of you out there have no patience for that anymore, because it's disingenuous, it's bad for the hobby, it's bad for creativity, and like John said, it's eventually going to turn. It's not always going to be that, white men are the great evil. If we allow this thing to persist, it's going to be a situation where you have rabid armies of consumers that are willing to, tear apart their fellow man just because the company that produces the movies or the TV shows or whatever it is that they like tells them that this, type of person is evil. It's the kind of thinking that gives you, and I know this is a cliche, it's the kind of thinking that gives you something like Nazi Germany. So we really need to be cautious about this mindset permeating what's essentially our fun time, our leisure activities, things that we previously pursued to get away from the pain and reality of real life, things like role-playing games, comics, movies, TV, video games, etc. We can't tolerate this anymore, and we need to absolutely build parallel to this and overtake this rotted, evil mindset that the products you consume for your leisure are your identity, and you need to, fight tooth and claw for it because I don't know why. It's your personality at this point. It's this weird thing that I keep trying to wrap my head around of how all of these people become so religiously devoted to brands, massive corporations, things that don't care about them at all, things that will grind them up and spit them out whenever they become inconvenient to them. And, that's what I'm looking to circumvent with, everything that I do here.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, great point. Another thing to consider, most of this is fake.
Yeah.
It's coming from the media who takes advantage of the internet, which the internet's a wonderful thing, but the media will take advantage of it, and they'll just make it seem like there's a legit race war between all the different races. There's a sex war between men and female. Like everybody has to be segregated and separated. But the truth is, I walk out of my house and I go to the stores where I know all the people there because I don't really drive far because I work from home, but I go to stores every a couple times a week, and I know the people there. And if I marked up all their sexes and races, I would win diversity bingo right off the bat. I live in South Florida, and it's been diverse for my entire life here, and it's never really been a topic until 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So and we all get along, we joke. This is mostly just made up online, and people believe it like it's real life. I'll even run into people with blue hair. Very cordial with them. They're cordial with me. No disrespect, no hate. Most of this is just made up online for views and the grift. So just keep that in mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, this is something that our brother in arm, Mark Clare, would echo if he were here to say the same thing. Sometimes people will ask me why I watch wrestling, why I'm into professional wrestling. And on one hand, it's because I like professional wrestling and I don't have to answer to you. But on the other hand, if you can understand the psychology behind professional wrestling, you understand the culture war.
Yeah. Oh, man. Probably going back to the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Probably is a bit of a predictor of the culture war. Think about, having Iron Sheik as a villain. Wasn't there a Russian guy that was? I can't remember. It's been a while. Again, my brain is failing. Yeah, there you go. That's it. Oh, maybe wrestling is a predictor of what the future is going to be like in 30 years. I should start paying attention.
Even like just beyond like the specific storylines, this idea of the evil dastardly heel who's going to be on, he's the champion. He holds all the cards in his hand, and he's, completely unscrupulous. He's going to lie, cheat, and steal his way to, staying on top. And then there's this scrappy underdog babyface who's going to fight their way through it and overcome all the cheating. And eventually, in the middle of that ring, he's going to pin that heel 1, 2, 3, and everyone's going to celebrate the, triumph of this ultimate paragon of all things good. That is the central storyline that everyone tries to sell you, whether it's in politics on Capitol Hill. If you look at the way that politics are presented, it's very much depending on who's doing the spin. One side is the babyface, one side's the heel. You look at that with culture war stuff too. It's always, the institutional evil white men, the people who have traditionally occupied the, levers of power and, the main consumer base. They're the heels. They're the bad guys. And we're, all of the, diversity coalition. They're the scrappy underdog baby faces, even though they really aren't. They've got the complete full backing of all the major corporations and institutions behind them. But they're going to, overthrow this, dastardly, evil, bad guy, pin him in the ring, 1, 2, 3, and then everyone's going to celebrate their triumph. And everything will be better. They're on after. That's professional wrestling, and that's the culture war.
Yeah, and I think that perfectly explains Kyle Brink here. He's being the baby face for the left and the heels to the right, and he doesn't care about either one. It's a calculated move to get his name out there and try and strengthen his position. So
Yep.
I think that's a good comparison you brought in there with professional wrestling.
Mm-hmm. Baron G Rock in chat says at this point Congress has less maturity than an 8th grade class. You find that in every kind of legislative body. If you ever watch like British Parliament, it essentially is an 8th grade class. That's what it is. Government is Hollywood or stand-up comedy for ugly, uncharismatic people, or not as charismatic people, and that's that's the show. It's a show put on in front of us to make us think that good things are happening, where in the back there's full cooperation between everyone who's in power, and they're just going to do what they do.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's a lot of power behind that show, and that's what they're hiding from you, right? That's what's behind the curtain. So, I don't really call myself I don't call myself a libertarian anymore. Not really, just flat out don't call myself a libertarian anymore. That doesn't mean that I don't love freedom or I don't believe in a lot of principles or agree with a lot of the economic principles that they have. I don't think any of that's changed. But I do think, and we talked about Pete, I think he brings up a good point that, power is important. And going back to what we were talking about before about being selfish, there's nothing wrong with making yourself a power structure.
Right.
You shouldn't apologize for that. You should want to make yourself the most money you can. Buy a lot of guns. Be intimidated. Be a force to deal with. Like, make people think twice before they mess with you. And nothing wrong with that. And that can be used to better your children. And that's what I try and do. It could be used to better your wife or husband, which I try and do. Your extended family, which I have a pretty big extended family. And that could be all used for good. Doesn't have to be used for bad. So, yeah, just make yourself a power structure and don't apologize for it, because the people that are really running the show, they want the power over you.
Yeah, and I mean, I do still call myself a libertarian, if nothing else, for the expedience of, people somewhat understand what a libertarian is, but in reality, I'm much more of the Hans Hermann Hoppe mindset of, once government is overthrown, there still needs to be a power structure in place. We just have to build decentralized power structures, and we have to be pretty ruthless in making sure that those, the societies that we want stay intact, to make sure that we don't lose what we've fought so hard for. So, yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with amassing power for yourself, because if you don't have that power over your life and, you're not able to resist other powers trying to take what's yours, you're just going to end up powerless again.
Yeah, and some people can take what you just said there as controversial as far as being ruthless,
Of
which
course.
I like to play on words there.
Yeah.
But think about it this way, because this is the same thing. You're in your house, in your bed, sleeping. Somebody breaks in. Dog barks. You get up, grab your gun. It's a home invader, and you shoot and kill them. Are you justified?
Absolutely.
Yeah, 100%. Same thing. Say that is a guy coming into your home, trying to mess with your power structure. It could possibly kill you, could possibly kill your family, could steal your stuff. You don't know what he's there for. Same thing, same comparison. So what you said could be controversial or misconstrued as controversial, really shouldn't be. And I think until we realize that, we'll be immature as a culture.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even if you go back to, and this is something that I really like, looking at medieval history, medieval towns and cities, they were like kind of their own units, essentially. The baron had an armory, and everyone who lived in the town was expected, every able-bodied man was expected to take up arms in defense of what was theirs, not just what belonged to the baron, but what belonged to them. Because, you're a person living in, Norman territory in the 1100s, and here come the Saxons. They're not just gonna, take what the chief or the baron or whoever's in charge of your community is. They're also going to kill you and take your family and, have their way with them. You can fill in the details yourself of what that means. So you're not just fighting for the person who's in charge. You're fighting for yourself as well. So these power structures need to exist, and we just need to make sure that you have power yourself, so that people can't take away that power. You have to be able to defend yourself. You have to be able to live as a free individual. And what that means is you have to be willing to take upon, this willingness to fight for your existence and your success in this world.
Yeah, what's that saying? What's the one thing that can beat a bad guy with a gun?
A good guy with a gun.
And if you're on the right, maybe you say, if you're on the left, you would probably say that's the police at this point. If you're on the right, that you'd say that's an individual. But whether it's a police or a citizen, the important part of that saying is good guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's the important part. It's up to both men and women to be good representatives of themselves and their family and their society. So good guy with a gun. That's a power structure.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Now, speaking of rugged, tough individuals who are willing to take upon themselves the willingness to do violence in defense of what's theirs, let's talk a little bit about Ruthless. This comic that you have created, and it's not just a comic. Very specifically, for people who are unfamiliar with this, Ruthless is a heavy metal audio comic. So from there, John, I want you to kind of give everyone the elevator pitch of what this particular book is.
Sure. Yeah, I promote it as a heavy metal audio comic, which is different. Right? I don't think that term has ever been used, or those words have ever been used in that order to promote a piece of media. The reason I wanted to promote it like that is to really kind of relate what it is off the bat in as little words as possible. So if you think audiobook compared to a book, you have, book, you have a 300-page book with a story. Audiobook, you have just a narration that tells you that story. Nice and calming. Maybe they'll have a little bit of music at the beginning. Where a comic, if you compare a comic to a book, a comic's a lot more colorful. It has art. The words aren't all the same. Sometimes you'll have a small text box, and then sometimes you'll have a big wham that kind of put an exclamation mark on what's going on. It's a combination of the art and the letters on the page that tell the story, not just the letters on the page. You have to consume both to really take in everything that's going on with a comic. And from an audio perspective, which I do have art in this as well, but the heart of it's an audio product. So from an audio perspective, I did that with Ruthless. So comic for a few things. One, the colorfulness of it. One, the length. It's only the episodes will all be between 15 and 20 minutes, or I should say issues. The first issue that's out now for free on my channel on YouTube is 17 minutes long. So not a big commitment. You can kind of hop in, hop out, and get along with your day. And it's just long enough to get a little bit of satisfaction from an entertainment perspective. And the color comes in from an audio perspective with the music. I do it a complete original soundtrack. It's all heavy metal. It's basically my return to heavy metal. I've been jonesing to come back and write some heavy metal for a long time. I used to be in 2 bands. I was a lead guitarist in those bands. That's where I first got into, composing and home recording. So this is something that I really enjoyed doing. And heavy metal audio comic. So that's the audio part. That's the audio pitch of it. Now, I didn't want to just release an audio and that was it, because doing Project Full Blade, like you brought up before, we did audio trilogies with full scores. And if you just do an audio format, it's a lot to throw at somebody.
Yeah.
And some people can keep up with it and some people can't. And that's not anybody's fault. That's just, we're all different. So what I did with Ruthless is I created the audio portions of it, very dramatic music. Joe, my brother, he's doing the voice acting and narration for the main character, Ash, which is more important than the music because he really brings that main character to life with what he's doing. Mm-hmm. And then I went out and I found an artist. I don't know if he call himself Comicsgate, but I met him when the whole thing with Isom was blowing up. He's a big fan of Isom. And I met him because I did a concept theme for Isom, and he did a concept drawing for Isom, and I asked him if I can use his drawing for my YouTube thumbnail, and he said yes, and then we started talking, and I brought him in as the artist of Ruthless. His name is Sean Stevens. So you have this narration, you have this custom soundtrack that's written in tandem with the story, so it's locked in real tight when you listen to it. And then you have this art that kind of goes along in video format and tells the story. So you'll see, as you're listening to the narration and the soundtrack, you'll see one piece of art come up on the left and then another piece of art come up on the right to kind of finish the panel, comic panel, for lack of a better term. Sometimes it'll be a full piece. I plan on getting creative with that in the second issue that I'm working on now. I've got some new ideas for how I'm going to do the art panels. But yeah, and then to top it all off, there's comic style lettering with the white boxes that appear that line up with the narration, so you can listen to it. You can, when you watch the YouTube video, you can see the art, you can see the lettering of the comic lettering come up, so you can read along as you listen. So even though I'm throwing a lot at you from this type of media, I did it in a way where it's not that difficult, rather easy to kind of keep on with it. If you kind of get lost, you can read it. If you're catching on from an audio perspective, you can just focus on the art, or you can alternate back and forth. So I think it's just really innovative, cool little project that I did. I love the metal part of it. I love that I'm working with my brother. I love that I'm meeting people like Sean, who's amazing artist. There are a lot of people who want to voice act in it. I'm going out and getting some voice actors for this. I'd love to collaborate with musicians and actually bring in people to do some tracks on top of mine. So it's this really cool thing where you get to kind of forge friendships and make a little name for yourself.
And having done work with you guys before, if you do need someone else to do some voice work, just, let me know.
That's right. Ryan's a great voice actor. Yeah, absolutely. I'll be reaching out to you soon. I haven't reached out to anybody yet, but you're on my list.
Dartham Dio.
Yeah, Ryan did voice act for Project Full Blade's audio trilogies. What was that king? He was a king. I forget the king's name, though.
I can't remember his name off the top of my head either, but yeah, he was a king, and I basically did my old man mixed with my impression of Norman Osborn from Spider-Man, the animated series, so...
It was great. My brother's going to kill me, and that's a problem because he is bigger than stronger than me, and I forgot the king's name, so I got to watch out.
But yeah, I mean... it really is kind of an interesting story that you set up here. It is of the kind of, post-apocalyptic genre, but the story that you set up here is one, to be perfectly honest, this is something that I have wished for over the past 3 years to happen in real life. All electronic devices have ceased to function. In that's the world we find Ash in as we begin the journey of Ruthless. So what kind of inspired that specific apocalypse, just in your mind?
Yeah, so I took a lot of time to set up how I deliver the media to you. Now let's get into the story, right? Because this is my favorite part. So before I get into it, I'm not a writer. I'm a composer. I've composed albums upon albums of music throughout my life. So I am a creative person, but I'm not a good writer. That said, this was the one story I thought I could write, and I was only cocky enough to try this from doing those audio trilogies with Joe. Because, I had to do the mixing and mastering, so I had to listen to those for hundreds of hours, and it was just repeated, how he wrote and did his stories, and we developed this skill over 2-3 years. So it's I can do this, and I obviously brought Joe, and he did a narration. He ad-libbed a lot. He would give ideas for stories, so he's kind of the co-writer of this. But story starts off. Main character's name is Ash. because we need a new. They're killing Ash off in Pokemon. They killed Ash off in Evil Dead. We need a solid lead character with the name of Ash. That can't die. So I'm taking up the torch there, right? Main character's name is Ash. He is on business in Chicago. His family's in Florida. Very simple story. And an event called The Short just mysteriously knocks out basically the world's power grid. Just all power just in the world goes out. And if you think about if that happened today, would we survive or would we not survive? How quickly would the world degrade or fall apart, right?
Yeah.
And I think it would. I think it would fall apart pretty quick.
Oh, yeah.
Especially in the big cities. And then it would just filter out from there. And you wouldn't even need zombies. Humans would take care of the job.
Yeah.
So that's the premise behind the story. Like, if this happened in real life, what would happen? And that's basically kind of my driving force behind the story. So in the story, if you listen to it, it starts off with Ash away from his family. This terrible event happens. Within days, society is just, people are killing each other in the streets. It's becoming, I think one of the lines in there, it took hundreds of years for us to become civilized, but only a few days to return to medieval times. That's not the exact line, but that's kind of one of the lines he has in there describing it. And I think that was a great way to put it, of like, it takes so much more effort to build something than it does to tear something down. It would be good to have a story to remind people of that, of how important it is not to be destructive. And it's much harder to be creative than destructive, but it's so much more meaningful. And man, it's so much better for the human race if we were to all do that. So yeah, electricity's done. Ash has to walk home from Chicago to Florida in this world where people are literally killing each other. I get into that a little bit. We're going to go back and have some flashbacks with that. We're going to have one in the second issue. Gets home, doesn't find his family, doesn't find bodies, but doesn't find his family. He doesn't know if they're alive or dead. So he kind of is lost and he falls into himself, and he doesn't have, when you're lost, you don't really have a point of focus for inspiration.
Right.
So I don't want to give too much away, but there's a scene in the middle, and this is where the whole thing kind of picks up and it gets fast paced, and it's pretty much fast paced until the end, where he builds a weapon for himself. And it's not that this weapon is super effective. It's that this weapon has deeper meaning to him. It's something that that matters, something with sentimental value. And he wants to turn this into something that he can fight for his life with in this new world that he finds himself in. And after that, there's an action scene and a little bit of character development. And we introduce one of the side characters, the first side character towards the end. That'll be a long-term character in this story. And it's really just world building and setup and introducing it to this guy named Ash, who's found himself in a world that has recently become post-apocalyptic. Not to drag on too much, but one other element that I haven't really described in this is, even though that story, it's a post-apocalyptic story, it's a very simple story. It'd actually be very easy to adapt and cheap to adapt for a movie. And I do the soundtrack, right? So you don't have to get a guy for the soundtrack. But in addition to that, there is a lot of heavy metal themes in here. This story is a love letter to the heavy metal fans. When you see the weapon, if you check it out, you're going to see exactly what I mean. There's going to be song titles buried in as lines of dialogue from some of my favorite metal artists. There's going to be a lot of Easter eggs of heavy metal buried into the story as I build it up. So
yeah,
if you don't like metal, you may not like this, but if you like heavy metal, you got to check this out. You're probably going to like it.
Mm-hmm. And I will kind of let everyone in on a little secret here. If you look over what would be John's left shoulder right now, you can see the inspiration for the weapon. It's right there on the wall behind him. And this is... I want to preface this by saying this is not an attack on the story or the character that you have set up here. But when I was watching and listening to the first issue of Ruthless, I was thinking that Ash very much feels like you had put yourself in this situation and kind of written out what you would do if you found yourself in these circumstances. I see a lot of John Page in the character of Ash.
Yeah, there's a lot in style. I want to be very careful of. I don't want it to necessarily be a straight self-insert where it matters.
Mhm.
As far as style, yes, I'm sticking to what I know. There's a scene in there before he builds his guitar weapon because you spoiled it. Damn, you should have said spoilers ahead. Just kidding. There's a scene where he talks about guns. I know a lot about guns, and I get into kind of like some of the type of guns he has and ammo. And the reason why you may not always want to use a gun in a fight in this new world. He kind of goes into describing that. I'm sticking to what I know, but the character, we introduced him a lot of his personality in the first issue, but I don't want him to be like me personality wise. And right. You see a lot of John Page as far as style, but I think when you get into some more issues and as the story builds out, hopefully you'll realize this isn't 100% self-insert.
Right.
The reason I'm sticking to kind of what I know as far as style is because, again, I'm not a writer. Like, this is the one story I can write. So I'm going to there's a lot of my style going to be in the story. But I definitely want to avoid making him a straight self-insert. I want to do a good job of writing, separate it from myself, which it will. I've got some plans on how to make it not a self-insert. And, yeah, I have 2 runs planned for this, actually. A comic issue run is multiple issues of a story. So basically, if you equate that to a television series, I have 2 series planned for this already. So there's big plans for developing this character, introducing you to the story and the world that Ash finds himself in.
And the Pronto here in chat asks a pretty good question, just for anyone who's looking to get into this. Who are your favorite metal artists? And then I'll even specify who are the ones that are specifically inspiring the music and the action that you find in Ruthless.
All right, so I have to answer that question in 2 parts. Let's start with my favorite metal bands. So Pantera is number 1. And even though I barely listen to Pantera currently, I've listened to every album, every song, hundreds of times. I know every drum hit, fill, guitar solo, bass line, whether it's rhythm or a solo walking behind Dime. If Rex is walking behind, like in 5 Minutes Alone, if you ever listen to 5 Minutes Alone, the guitar solo is rather simple, but if you hear Rex in the background kind of doing his bass walks, it's just great. Like, it just all comes together. So Pantera's from a composition and a artistry, their ability to play, Phil's ability to sing, it's just amazing. So Pantera all time number 1. Nobody even comes close. Number 2 is Dio. Just one of the most unique, amazing singers, powerful singers out there. And if you haven't seen that Dio documentary that they just released on Showtime, it's one of the best documentaries I've ever seen. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a huge Dio fan. Got to see that if you haven't seen that. And then number 3, as far as metal, I'm going to say Overkill. Overkill is actually one of the inspirations for me getting back into writing music. This was 3.5 years ago, kind of coming up on 4 years in June. And they released their album in 2019. What was it called? I think it was Wings of War. And they had a song on there called Believe in the Fight. Now, if you don't know who Overkill is, they were a thrash hair metal band that started in the 80s. They sucked in the 80s. They had producers tell them, you're never going to be a good band. Stop doing it. And they never gave up. And when I heard that, when my brother Joe introduced me to Overkill, when I first heard them, I hated them. I could not stand them. And they just kept producing music over the decades. And then the year 2000 hit, and they were just producing really excellent thrash metal. And in 2019, 20 years after that, they released an album with what I think is their best song in their entire career called Believe in the Fight. So if they can do it in their mid-50s, I could do it in my mid-30s. And that was a huge inspiration for me to get back into writing music, was Overkill. So that's my top 3. Pantera, Dio, and Overkill. I think it's a solid top 3. So that's my favorite metal bands. As far as what inspires me to write, I mean, I've been doing metal music since I was 20, and I'll be 40 this year. So I don't really listen to a lot of metal. I'll listen to some Overkill here and there, Dio here and there. Not really a whole lot of Pantera anymore. But I've really kind of developed my own style, and I actually avoid listening to too much music so I can try and create an original product as possible when I go to compose these scores. And that's kind of it. Kind of sounds sad because I don't really expose myself to too much other music nowadays, but I think it's necessary to try and really tap whatever you have in yourself that's original.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I will answer for myself. I am also a huge Dio fan. You guys can't see it, but I've got a poster up on one of my walls right over here. That is for a Ronnie James Dio birthday celebration that one of my friends put on here in Nashville, where a bunch of tribute bands played Dio stuff. So I am also a huge Dio fan. And recently I've been on a big Volbeat kick. I am really into a lot of the stuff that they've done. Volbeat's one of those bands where every time I hear a song by them, I'm just like, I really like this song. Who sings it? And then I Shazam it or I look it up and I'm just like, oh, that's Volbeat too. Sweet. So that's a band that I've really been kind of, digging into a lot. And then to round out my top three, I think Sabaton would be up there as well for me right now.
I've never heard of Volbeat. It was it Volbeat?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna check them out. Let me just make a note here before.
Yeah, and they're not what you'd call like traditional heavy metal. They are metal. They're a Danish band, first of all, but they're metal mixed with a little bit of like a rockabilly sound.
That could work. I don't know if you ever heard of Rebel Meets Rebel, but it was basically Pantera with David Allan Coe, but it was like country heavy metal. It worked really well. They pulled it off. So everything lays in the execution.
Yeah.
And heavy metal rockabilly, that can be really cool if you do it right.
Mm-hmm. If I were to recommend one song, just to like start you out on your Volbeat journey, their most recent album has a song called Shotgun Blues on it. I feel like that's a good introduction to the sound of Volbeat.
I got it pulled up here. After we finish, I'll check it out.
It's a fantastic song.
Awesome.
But yeah, that's where my mind has been recently as far as heavy metal goes. But yeah, I do think it's interesting that you've kind of distanced yourself from listening to music basically to like keep your mind fresh for, you don't want to start writing a whole like suite of music only to realize that you've essentially, like copied the most recent album that you listened to. To give yourself that space to be creative and, to not lean so heavily on inspirations. I believe very, very much in wearing your inspirations on your sleeve, but there's something to be said for distancing yourself from similar media in order to let, new ideas come out of you instead of just taking apart and reassembling someone else's idea.
Yeah, and I'm inspired by quite a bit. And it's awesome. It's awesome to be inspired. It's really awesome to inspire somebody else. And I haven't inspired many people, but over the years, there have been a handful that have given me feedback that I've inspired. Some family members got into doing bands. They came out and when we were playing with Metal Rain, my old band, back 18 years ago. We had some younger family members come out, and then when they grew up, they had their own bands, and they basically told me, "Hey, and I just like that. When I saw you play, I really wanted to do this." So, inspiring people, man, that's the biggest. That's more of a payoff than any kind of money you can ever get, and that's a big reason why I try and do this, and hopefully, I can inspire a few more people before I pass. But not that I'm passing for a while. I'm gonna live till I'm 150. But yeah. That connection and just passing on your passions to somebody else. I mean, that's what living's about.
Yeah.
So that's my favorite part.
Mm-hmm. Now, as far as when people can expect issue number 2 and, subsequent issues, what kind of release schedule are you hoping or shooting for with Ruthless?
Yeah, so here's that's a good question, and I've already changed my mind from the last time I answered this question back in January 1st or December 31st.
Mm.
I was originally hoping to get 3 to 4 issues of Ruthless out a year. Um, it takes me about 2 months total to do a solid quality 17-minute soundtrack, and I do everything. I do, I play the guitar, I do all the drums, bass, solos, the ancillary. It's just not all guitars. Like I have a pretty big setup of virtual instruments, or it could be orchestra, could be synth sounds, electronic sounds, and I want to introduce some of those too to kind of keep it exciting. But for a 15 to 20-minute episode, a month and a half to 2 months to do the music. For me, only the music. Then you have to do the narration. So what I do is I write it out, all the narration, and I'll actually record a scratch track for Joe, not necessarily to tell him this is exactly how you do it, more so he knows what the pacing is.
Yeah.
Because the tempo changes throughout it. Like, when there's an action scene and I'm picking up the speed, the tempo picks up. So I need to record myself at that tempo, so when Joe gets it, he knows what tempo to record it at. And same when it slows down, and I want to take you on a roller coaster. I want to bring you up, and I want to pull you down and make it emotional. The tempo is going to slow, so I have to record that at whatever tempo the song's at, so Joe knows what tempo to go. So that's a whole process there. Then there's working on the art with Sean Stevens, trying to come up with every single scene and describing exactly what I want to him, but not pigeonholing him, so he can add his own little creative twist to what I'm asking for. And then there's putting it all together and editing it in that video format. So the first episode, we had a little bit of hang up on one of the items. I can get an episode out every 3 months that's all I did. But then, and you probably can speak to this too, you have to balance it with building your name and figuring out a way to get exposure to your creation. So if I just pumped out an episode of Ruthless every 3 months and did nothing to promote it, nobody would watch it. And what good would that do? So I've decided that I'm probably going to put out 2 to 3 episodes of Ruthless a year. And that's going to depend on how much other collaboration work I get from Iron Age creators, podcasters, because every time I work with somebody, their audience has an opportunity to learn who I am. And if they like metal, they may like Ruthless. So I'm striking this balance of working with other creators. A lot of the time, I do charge. Sometimes I work for free. Just depends on how I feel. So if you reach out to me for work, expect to be charged, and if you're not, just say thanks. But it's this balance of working with other creators, doing my best for them, really spending the time with them to say, hey, what do you want? What do you envision? How do you want people to feel when you listen to this music? How can I have this accurately represent your product? I take that very seriously. It's not just on a whim, oh, I'll do a cheap ass track for you. I really want to write something that connects for them too. And I think that will help grow my name as somebody who's an honest creator, and that'll eventually filter back to Ruthless. So it's that balance of working with other creators and putting this out there and getting attention to it. I'm expecting 2 to 3 issues of Ruthless a year.
Absolutely. Yeah, and where can people find Ruthless? What's your channel? Where can people find updates on all things Ruthless, and where can people actually watch the show itself?
It's for free, so the price is right. It's for free on my YouTube channel, JVP Music. If you go to YouTube, search JVP Music, it'll take you right there. I don't know if you'll put the link in there. You're usually pretty good at that, so maybe you put the link in the channel for there. But yeah, it's not my most recent video, but it's my pin video. 17 minutes long. You can just go there, click play. No money, sit there. And again, if you like metal, you'll probably have 17 minutes of enjoyment and say, man, I hope issue 2 comes out sooner than later. That's where you find it.
Absolutely. And real quick, I will drop the link to your channel right here in chat, and then I'll stick this in show notes and stuff like that as well, so that people can see it. So right there, those of you who are following along in chat, is John's channel. It'll be in the description of this stream for those of you who are watching after the fact. And those of you who are listening on audio, you'll be able to see John's channel in the show description on whatever podcatcher you're using. So definitely check out both Ruthless and the other videos that he's doing. To bring things back to role playing, you have actually done a video on the OGL situation for all of the crazy nonsense that came along with that particular storm of just awfulness that we're not done with, by the way. Don't think that because WotC has given up for now, they've given up forever. So we're still RPG gorillas around here.
I like that term that you came up with. That should catch on. If that doesn't catch on, that's not on you. That's on them. Are we running out of time? Can we talk about OGL for a second?
Yeah, we can talk about OGL for a little bit.
Here's my problem with OGL. This is coming from somebody who played first edition, second edition, extended second edition. If you've never played Dungeons and Dragons second edition, you had your core handbook, your monster manual, your dungeon master, all that stuff. And I know there's a bunch of books out for fifth edition, but you had your skills and powers, you had your combat and tactics, you had your spell compendiums. There were 4 different thick ass books of spell compendiums, and I've read every single spell in every single one of those books. Second edition, as far as the content that they released, was amazing. It was just endless. Third edition was good too. They simplified it. Honestly, I don't see a difference between fifth edition and third edition at a macro level. I know there's some minor differences in there, but it's basically the same game. And third edition is way better than fifth. You should just pick up a third edition book and play it. But I love Dungeons and Dragons. That really kind of uncorked the fantasy lover in me, and to see what it is today is really sad and heartbreaking. And I'm going to hate on it now, but I didn't start there. I loved the game for what it was, first, second, and third edition. Mm-hmm. It really fell off fourth edition, and I know fifth edition's big, but my biggest problem with OGL, and this is coming from somebody who I didn't create Project Full Blade, which is my brother's tabletop. He did all the hard work with creating the game. I was more of an admin, and I helped him produce the audiobooks. So I did a lot of work, but as far as the creative mind behind the game, it was all Joe. This is coming from somebody who just tried and failed to make a tabletop work for the last 3 years. So, that whole process is getting in different online groups for tabletops, including Dungeons and Dragons, streaming with you. We did a D&D stream.
Yep.
And I had no idea of what it became getting back into it. And I was like, man, it was really, I don't know. You're a strong dude for sticking in this, because it really killed it. Yanked the hope right out of me. Luckily, I got in it to write music, so I could still do that. But over those 3 years, I saw that game change in a way that was just terrible. It was an imagination killer. You could not... nobody played with their friends was the first thing I saw. Yeah. Everybody would try and find random groups to play, and that is not how you want a tabletop. You want to get your friends and family and pull them in and like, hey, let's try this game out. You want to play with people you actually like to sit down and enjoy spending time with. Yeah. That's number one. That's your first goal. Don't look for players who are experienced. Make new players out of the people in your close circles. Number one with tabletop. Number two, that's how I got into it. My friends got me into it, and cousins. Number two, as this game degraded, and as orcs became racist. They liken orcs to black people, which to me is racist as fucking hell.
Yeah.
But they tried to flip it and say, oh no, the way orcs are. And it's like, no, they're imaginary orcs. They don't exist. What are you doing? Like, no, don't ruin this. And they killed that. And they just kept going with just neutering every... they neutered every risky thing that made Dungeons and Dragons beautiful. I guess that's the best way I can summarize it. Mm-hmm. And nobody cared. No, maybe some OGL. I'm sorry, not OGL. The OSR people cared, and props to them. Props to the OSR guys for kind of speaking out, but they never really gained traction online To me, maybe OSR is bigger than I give them credit for, but to me, it's always kind of like a small decentralized type of movement. OSR.
It is. OSR, think of OSR like libertarians. It's not even just one group. It's a bunch of fragmented groups that can't even get along with each other. There's kind of a generalized movement, but it's not even necessarily one specific thing. Much like in libertarian circles, people can't even agree on what OSR stands for. So
nice. that really is the libertarian. Yeah. Anyway, props to the OSR guys for trying to do what they can. Never caught, and that's not your fault. But the bulk of their players outside of OSR gave not a shit. Didn't care to go back into the history of Dungeons and Dragons, play the older editions. They just liked Fifth because it was dumbed down, and nobody cared what they did to that game. And then the OGL changes came out, and everybody was pissed. And I was like, where the fuck was this anger when they destroyed the game? How come this anger is only coming out when it could potentially hit your pocketbook? Because you don't love Dungeons and Dragons. You don't see it as a game that you want to experience with your loved ones. You see it as a way to make money. You want to monetize Dungeons and Dragons so you don't have to get a real job. And as soon as they came to fuck with that money, that's when everybody got pissed. And to me, that's I don't know if you ever played Final Fantasy. There's a spell called Doom. And when you cast it over somebody, a fucking counter comes over their head with 10 seconds, and it slowly counts down to 0. And when it hits 0, you're dead. I saw that fucking little Doom counter come up over D&D. It's only a matter of time before that thing dies out because nobody plays it because they love it. They're in it to try and filter some of that money to them, so that's what they can do for a living. And maybe that's not a fair assessment of everybody. That's a fair assessment of a lot, maybe even the majority of the players that they cultivated for 5th edition, for what they did to destroy that game. It's really tragic. I hated seeing it. I know that's going to piss a lot of people off, but that's my honest assessment. I think it's somewhat accurate. Maybe not 100%, but there's definitely some accuracy in there, and it's terrible.
Yeah, it really exposed just how many people are around essentially to strip mine the IP for what little bit of like clout they can get out of it. These people are tourists, dilettantes, opportunists, whatever it is you want to call them. This thing became popular because, right around the same time, Critical Role got popular, Stranger Things came out, and a new edition of the game was released, all within a few years of each other, which created this perfect storm of, D&D's popular now, and then, hey, all of these celebrities, some of them have been playing for their whole lives, but some of them are just now kind of jumping on the bandwagon because it's a bandwagon to jump on. But now you have all these people that are trying to extract value from this thing which has stood for 40 plus years. And what they're running into now is WotC is trying to completely monopolize not just that IP, but really like role-playing as a whole. And you're seeing just how many people don't care about the integrity of this thing that they're sucking value out of. They only care that the value that they are extracting and taking into themselves is being jeopardized in some way. So it really has exposed who's going to be in it for the long haul, who's going to be willing to fight and go down swinging at these monolithic corporations that are going to bring this hobby down or bring it out of its golden age or out of its kind of peak popularity, and who's just going to move on to the next big thing to suck value out of once all the value is gone from the D&D mountain.
And maybe I'm wrong. I really think there's a death sentence on D&D right now.
Yeah,
because again, like I said, things evolve. So it was. I think they sold their longevity for short-term exposure to a group of people that are going to leave them and sell them out very soon. I don't think it's going to take long. When that movie comes out, I guarantee you that movie bombs. I don't think it's going to even turn a profit. I don't know how much they spent on it. I can't imagine that movie turns a profit. And if I'm wrong, The second one they make will definitely not turn a profit. And I know I'll be right on that one. Sometimes it takes a movie for people to catch on and say, oh, this is shit. Like, The Last Jedi. And then you had Rise of Skywalker, and then they released Solo, and that lost a shitload of money. Mm-hmm. So it'll catch on eventually. But yeah, you see who their clientele is. They're concerned about making money, not giving money for a product. And that is not going to work long term. It's just not.
Mm-hmm. And honestly, that's why I'm now doing what I'm doing on Rollin Bones. I don't care. I've been involved with people who want to make, actual play shows and want to, essentially turn this game into entertainment. I don't want that, because most of the people who are playing role-playing games don't want to essentially make a TV show. They just want to play a game with their friends. And I want to give them the best possible game that they can play with their friends, with their loved ones, that I possibly can with all my creative energy. And I want to show people how to play this game to kind of the fullest of its potential. And so that's what Rollin Bones is now. I don't care about creating the next big actual play or becoming the next Critical Role. Someone else might do that. But that's not what I'm doing here. I'm here for those of you who want to run this game at your table with your friends, with beer and pizza and whatever it is you're eating, or whether you eat at all while you're gaming. I want this experience to be as good as it can possibly be for you, the average role-playing player, game master, whatever it is you do. I want you to have the most fun you can possibly have playing this game. I don't care about all of the extra trappings that have come along with it.
Yeah. So one of the things I'm going to take us back just for a second, but I think this is important to do some setup, because I'm going to bash Critical Role a little bit.
Go for it.
Which I'll give them credit for what they do. Very talented actors. And that's going to be the key word here when I get into it. But Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, and I saw this a lot. So if you come and say, no, that's not true, you're a goddamn liar. They bashed just straight up hack and slash campaigns. If you were a hack and slash player, you were an idiot. You were under them. It was role playing where it's at. I don't mean to insult you, because I know you're more the role player than hack and slash, and you're really good at it. You're really good at actually doing voices and role playing, and there's nothing wrong with that. Mm-hmm. But every good tabletop experience needs both.
Yeah.
You need a couple guys that can role play, and you need a couple tacticians that when the shit hits the fan, they know what to do to win a battle. Yeah. And that balance is what creates the game. And it's not any one of those. It's the combination of those two things that leads into how you actually perceive that at a personal level, not at the table. And the table is important, and having fun together is important, but it all filters back to you and how that impacts your imagination, how well you can imagine what's going on, how well you can take it in, how excited it makes you, how it makes you feel, the peaks and valleys of almost dying or getting a Vorpal bastard sword, which is the greatest magical weapon you could possibly receive in Dungeons and Dragons. But it all goes back to you, and the more you can take that in and the more it affects your imagination, the more that's going to feed back out to the other people that you're playing with. So it's not a selfish thing. That should be the goal. It's about impacting your imagination. It's not about role playing. It's not about hack and slash. It's your imagination and how you can filter that back to other people's imaginations. That's the goal of D&D, or at least it should be.
Yeah.
And shit, I lost my train of thought again. This is terrible. This is why I shouldn't drink Makers on the stream. But again, going back to Dungeons and Dragons, I guess I already kind of explained it, how they just would kill one aspect of that. I don't think. Oh, Critical Role. That's right. Yeah. I was going to bash Critical Role. Okay, back on track, guys. I'm back on the train track. They flipped the switch, and I'm rolling at 100 miles an hour. Critical Role is very good at their voice acting. I've watched exactly 1.5 episodes, and that's it of them. I seriously doubt the genuine excitement that they feel playing this game, because the key word is they're actors. This is a business to them. They make a lot, or at least they made. I don't know what's going to happen with these OGL changes, but they made a lot of money off of this. They had a show on Amazon Prime based off of their campaign. So you have to realize what that is it's a business. They want your money, and it may not all be genuine, because they are actors. A lot of them are actual voice actors that are doing this, and again, they're very good, but how genuine is it really? How big of a fan could you really be of Critical Role genuinely? Don't you question that? Like, I don't know, to me it just always kind of came off funny of how they presented it, and I watched it, and it just never connected with me to be 100% legitimate. And if something's not 100% legitimate, I'm just not into it.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, like, I guess for a lot of people out there, they don't look beyond the kind of that surface of, oh, you know, they're acting funny and they're being entertaining, and that's really all I need at this point. It's not. So many people who watch that show don't care necessarily about the integrity of the game. They don't think about that at all. It's just, oh, this is entertaining for a few hours. And, you know, that's how you get people. So...
Yeah, and I mean, if you watch Critical Role and like it, I'm not good for you. I'm not trying to bash you. I've got a lot of guilty pleasures. I like a lot of bad movies. I have a picture of The Last Dragon here because I met Bruce Leroy. One of my favorite movies. I know it's cheesy, so everybody should have a guilty pleasure, and if Critical Role is yours, fine.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I old school D&D meant so much to me. It's just that's a step too far. I just can't. It's a weird thing. It's a new thing. Like, I don't know if anybody did that before Critical Role, and if they did, fine. But they're the ones who really were successful at it first.
Yeah,
and it really blew D&D up. But again, I think this is all terrible for the game, because the crowd that they attracted was not loyal. It was people that wanted to be Critical Role, not people that wanted to play Dungeons and Dragons. That's who was brought into this game.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I hate to cut things off so abruptly, but we are a little bit over time here, and I do need to leave the stream for now. But John, it's been great having you on and talking with you. This has been a fantastic conversation, and we should do this more often.
Yeah, let me know. I don't want to pitch anything yet, but I talked about a stream that I'll probably start to do once a week coming up. You're going to be on there. Whenever you want me back, let me know. It's you're my again, you popped my cherry for intros, and you're one of my longer online friends here that I've met and have continued to have conversations with. So I hope you find continued success in Rollin Bones.
Thanks. Absolutely. I appreciate it. All right, guys. Well, that's going to do it for Rollin Bones tonight. I've had too much whiskey on the show as well, so it's not just you, John. Next week, on Valentine's Day, we will have a stream, and we will have Ken Spencer, who is the writer of a new series of adventures called the Northland Saga, coming out from Frog God Games. Those of you who've been around Rollin Bones for a long time are familiar with Frog God Games, but this will be Ken's first time on the show. We'll be talking all about his Viking-themed adventures, and having a good time talking all things Vikings, and why I think snow and ice is underutilized in role-playing. So that will be fun next week. I also want to make a quick announcement. I'm still finalizing the initial designs that will be available, but I do want to let everyone know that sooner rather than later, there will be a Rollin Bones TeePublic shop that is going to be opening up. We'll have t-shirts and probably mugs and other accoutrement for drinking coffee will be the initial offerings there. But there will be some Rollin Bones merch. Those of you who are dedicated enough to rep my logo in the real world, that option will become available to you here in the next few weeks. I'm excited about this. I don't know who would want to wear my logo around on a t-shirt besides me, but if that's you, if that sounds exciting, stay tuned here. I will give you guys some updates on when the Rollin Bones TeePublic store is open. But until then, and until next week, guys, whether you rolled a 1 or a 20, I am so glad that you rolled your bones with me, Ryan Howard, and I will see you guys next time.